One of the biggest mistakes people make with an avoidant is believing that more effort will create more connection. It sounds logical on the surface. If someone is pulling away, you try harder. If they're becoming distant, you send another message. If they seem uncertain, you provide more reassurance, more understanding, more patience. Most people think persistence is the answer, but when it comes to avoidant individuals, the very behavior that feels like love to you can feel like pressure to them. This is where so many relationships become trapped in a frustrating cycle. The more one person pursues, the more the avoidant withdraws. The more the avoidant withdraws, the more the other person pursues. Both people are reacting to fear, but they're reacting in opposite directions. The person chasing fears losing connection. The avoidant fears losing freedom. And because neither person understands what is really happening beneath the surface, they unintentionally create the exact outcome they are trying to avoid. What makes this dynamic so painful is that the chasing often comes from a sincere place. You're not trying to manipulate them. You're trying to save the relationship. You're trying to show them that you care. You're trying to prove that you're different from the people who hurt them in the past. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you try to convince someone of your value, the harder it becomes for them to discover it on their own. Human beings rarely appreciate what they never have the opportunity to miss. Think about it. If someone always knows you'll be there, always knows you'll respond immediately, always knows you'll tolerate uncertainty, they never experience the emotional contrast that creates appreciation. Your presence becomes predictable, not because you're unimportant, but because you've become constant. Psychologically, people become aware of value through absence as much as through presence. This doesn't mean playing games. It doesn't mean disappearing to create jealousy. It doesn't mean using silence as a weapon. It means reclaiming your own attention. For many people, chasing an avoidant becomes a full-time emotional job. They analyze every text. They monitor every social media update. They spend hours wondering what a delayed response means. Their emotional energy becomes completely focused on someone else's behavior. And the tragedy is that while they're busy chasing connection, they're slowly abandoning themselves. The irony is that avoidants often become more curious when they sense that your life is no longer revolving around them. Not because they enjoy being ignored, but because the pressure disappears. The emotional spotlight that was constantly pointed at them suddenly shifts elsewhere. Now they have room to think. Now they have room to wonder. Now they have room to experience your absence. Most avoidants are far more comfortable moving towards someone than feeling pulled toward them. The moment they feel they are being chased, their instinct is often to create distance. But when the chasing stops, something changes. The relationship is no longer being driven by pressure. It becomes driven by choice. And choice is incredibly important to an avoidant personality. This is why your goal should never be to force someone closer. Your goal should be to become so engaged with your own life that their attention is no longer the thing that determines your emotional state. Go back to your goals. Reconnect with your friendships. Invest in your health. Learn something new. Build a life that feels meaningful, whether they call you tomorrow or not. Because confidence is not pretending you don't care. Confidence is knowing you'll be okay, regardless of the outcome. That energy is magnetic because it communicates something powerful. It says, I value connection, but I don't need to chase it. And that is a completely different message from the one most people send when they become consumed by fear. The moment you stop chasing isn't the moment you stop caring. It's the moment you stop sacrificing your peace in an attempt to control someone else's choices. And when you do that, something remarkable happens. Whether the avoidant comes back or not, you regain something far more valuable than their attention. You regain yourself. Because the person who is hardest to walk away from is never the one who chases relentlessly. It's the one who knows their worth well enough to stop running after what should choose them freely. Once you've stopped chasing their attention, the next mistake becomes much easier to see. It's the habit of rewarding mixed signals. This is where many intelligent, self-aware people unknowingly undermine their own value. They tell themselves they're being patient. They tell themselves they're giving someone space. They tell themselves that relationships are complicated and that people move at different speeds. And all of that can be true, But there is a difference between understanding someone's and struggles and accepting behavior that keeps you permanently uncertain. Mixed signals create confusion because they contain just enough hope to keep you emotionally invested. One day, the avoidant seems interested. They send a thoughtful message, initiate contact, or show a level of warmth that makes you feel connected again. Then, just as quickly, they disappear. The energy changes. The effort fades. You're left wondering what happened. Most people respond to this inconsistency by doubling down. When the avoidant comes closer, they feel relieved. When the avoidant pulls away, they work harder. They become more available, more accommodating, more understanding. In their mind, they're protecting the connection. In reality, they're teaching the other person a powerful lesson. They're teaching them that inconsistency has no consequences. Think about the dynamic that develops. One person can appear and disappear at will, offer affection when it suits them, withdraw when things feel uncomfortable, and still receive the same level of attention, access, and emotional investment. Over time, this becomes the accepted pattern of the relationship. Not because the avoidant consciously designed it that way, but because human beings adapt to what is repeatedly rewarded. This principle exists far beyond relationships. In every area of life, behavior that produces a positive outcome tends to continue. If someone learns they can give minimal effort while still receiving maximum emotional availability, there is very little incentive for change. The difficult truth is that many people are not suffering because of an avoidance behavior alone. They are suffering because they continue investing at a level that is disconnected from what they are receiving. And that imbalance creates resentment. At first, the resentment is subtle. You tell yourself not to be needy. You tell yourself to be patient. But beneath the surface, frustration begins to grow. You're giving more than you're receiving. You're showing up more than they are. You're carrying a relationship that feels increasingly one-sided. The problem is that resentment rarely creates attraction. What creates attraction is self-respect. Self-respect means aligning your investment with reality instead of potential. One of the most dangerous things in relationships is becoming attached to who someone could be. We fall in love with possibilities. We imagine the version of them that communicates consistently, shows up fully, and overcomes their fears. Then we begin relating to that future version, instead of the person standing in front of us. But relationships don't exist in the future. They exist in the present. And the present is where standards matter. Standards are not ultimatums. They're not punishments. They're not demands designed to control another person. Standards are simply the boundaries that protect your emotional well-being. When someone is inconsistent, a healthy response is not to increase your investment. A healthy response is to match reality. If their effort decreases, your effort adjusts. If their engagement becomes uncertain, your availability becomes more measured. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of respect for yourself. This is the shift that many avoidants don't expect. They are often accustomed to people pursuing them despite their inconsistency. They expect the emotional door to remain open, no matter how often they step away from it. But when they encounter someone who values themselves enough not to reward uncertainty, something changes. For the first time, they are confronted with a relationship dynamic based on mutual responsibility rather than endless accommodation. And that's where genuine respect begins to grow. Because healthy attraction is not built on convincing someone to choose you. It's built on demonstrating that your time, energy, and emotional investment have value. The paradox is that the moment you stop giving unlimited access to someone who offers limited commitment, you become more compelling. Not because you've become unavailable, but because you've become intentional. You've stopped treating your attention as something that can be taken for granted. And that's a powerful transformation. Because at the end of the day, the people who command the most respect are not those who demand better treatment. They're the ones who quietly refuse to normalize less than they deserve. Once you've stopped chasing their attention and stopped rewarding mixed signals, there's another shift that becomes essential if you want to understand the psychology of an avoidant. You have to stop making them responsible for your happiness. This point is subtle because most people don't do it consciously. Very few people wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to make someone else responsible for my emotional well-being. Yet it happens all the time in relationships. It happens when your mood rises and falls based entirely on whether they text you back. It happens when a good day suddenly becomes a bad day because they seem distant. It happens when their approval becomes the thing that determines how valuable, attractive, or secure you feel. The danger is that what starts as affection can slowly become emotional dependence, and emotional dependence creates a kind of pressure that avoidants are particularly sensitive to. To understand why, you have to recognize that many avoidant individuals have a complicated relationship with closeness. Deep down, they often associate intimacy with obligation. They associate emotional dependence with a loss of freedom. Whether that belief comes from childhood experiences, past relationships, or simply years of self-protective habits, the result is often the same. The moment they feel responsible for carrying another person's emotional world, they become uncomfortable, not because they don't care, not because they lack feelings, but because the responsibility feels overwhelming. Imagine meeting someone and slowly realizing that every interaction has become emotionally loaded. If you respond quickly, they're happy. If you're busy, they're anxious. If you're affectionate, they feel secure. If you're distant, they feel devastated. Even someone with healthy attachment would eventually feel the weight of that dynamic. For an avoidant, that weight can feel suffocating. This is why so many people are confused when an avoidant starts pulling away precisely at the moment the relationship seems to be getting more serious. They think, we're becoming closer. Why are they retreating now? Often, it's because closeness has begun to feel like responsibility. And responsibility, in their mind, feels like pressure. The irony is that the solution isn't becoming less loving. The solution is becoming more complete. One of the most attractive qualities any person can possess is emotional self-sufficiency, not emotional isolation, not pretending you don't need anyone, but the ability to generate meaning, fulfillment, and happiness from multiple sources in your life, rather than relying on one person to provide all of it. Think about the difference between these two energies. The first says, I need you in order to feel okay. The second says, I deeply value you, but my life is already full of purpose, growth, and joy. The second energy is far more attractive because it removes pressure from the relationship. It transforms connection from a necessity into a choice. And choice is where healthy love thrives. Philosophically, this speaks to a deeper truth about human relationships. The strongest relationships are not built between two incomplete people trying to fix each other. They are built between two individuals who already possess a strong sense of self and choose to share their lives together. When we expect another person to complete us, we place an impossible burden on them. No human being can permanently sustain our confidence. No human being can permanently eliminate our fears. No human being can permanently guarantee our happiness. Those responsibilities belong to us. The moment we hand them to someone else, we create expectations that no relationship can realistically satisfy. And perhaps nowhere is this more visible than with avoidance. Avoidants often notice emotional pressure long before it is spoken aloud. They sense when someone's entire emotional equilibrium is becoming dependent on the relationship. They feel the growing expectation, even when it remains unspoken. And that awareness frequently triggers their instinct to create distance. This is why one of the most powerful things you can do is redirect energy back toward your own life. Strengthen your friendships. Invest in your ambitions. Develop interests that excite you. Create experiences that have nothing to do with whether this person chooses to move closer or further away. Because something remarkable happens when you do. You stop approaching the relationship from a place of scarcity. You stop seeing them as the source of happiness and start seeing them as a complement to an already meaningful life. And that shift changes everything. Not only does it make you more attractive, but it also protects your emotional health regardless of the outcome. Because when your happiness belongs to you, no one else's uncertainty can take it away. And that's the lesson worth remembering. The healthiest love is never built on needing someone to carry your happiness. It is built on two people who have learned to carry their own. After you've stopped chasing their attention, stopped rewarding mixed signals, and stopped making them responsible for your happiness, there's one final shift that brings all of these lessons together. You have to stop waiting around and start moving forward. This is often the hardest step because waiting can disguise itself as hope. People tell themselves they're being patient. They tell themselves they're giving the situation time. They convince themselves that if they just hold on a little longer, the avoidant will eventually realize what they have and come back. But what begins as hope can gradually become emotional stagnation. Weeks pass, months pass, and without realizing it, life becomes organized around someone else's uncertainty. You postpone decisions because you're waiting to see what they'll do. You hesitate to embrace new opportunities because you're still emotionally attached to a future that hasn't happened. You spend more time analyzing the relationship than actually living your life. And this is where many people lose something far more valuable than the relationship itself. They lose momentum. Momentum is one of the most important forces in human life. When we're growing, learning, exploring, and moving toward meaningful goals, we create energy. We feel engaged with the future. We become increasingly connected to our own sense of possibility. But waiting interrupts that process. Waiting keeps your attention fixed on what was instead of what could be. Psychologically, this creates a dangerous trap. The mind begins treating uncertainty as a problem that must be solved. Every text becomes a clue. Every social media update becomes evidence. Every memory becomes something to dissect and reinterpret. You become trapped in a cycle of analysis. And analysis can feel productive because you're constantly thinking. But thinking is not the same as moving. In fact, excessive thinking often becomes a substitute for action. The truth is that most avoidants are not sitting at home thinking about the relationship as much as the person waiting for them. They are focused on their own lives, their own challenges, and their own emotional processes. Meanwhile, the person who is waiting often places their entire future on hold. This creates an imbalance that quietly erodes confidence. Because confidence grows through action. Confidence grows when you pursue goals. Confidence grows when you challenge yourself. Confidence grows when you create experiences that remind you that your life is larger than any single relationship. This is why moving forward is not about forgetting someone. It's about refusing to abandon yourself while you figure out what happens next. There's a profound philosophical lesson here. Life does not reward those who remain frozen in place. Life rewards movement. You don't gain clarity by standing still. You gain clarity by engaging with life. Sometimes people worry that moving forward means giving up. They fear that if they focus on themselves, pursue new opportunities, or open themselves to new experiences, they're somehow betraying the relationship. But moving forward is not the opposite of caring. It's the opposite of waiting. And those are very different things. You can still care about someone while continuing to build your life. You can still love someone while pursuing your goals. You can still hope for reconciliation while refusing to put your future on hold. In fact, that is often the healthiest position you can occupy, because when you stop waiting, something unexpected happens. The emotional dynamic changes. The avoidant is no longer the center of your world. They're no longer the sole focus of your energy. They're no longer the person whose decisions determine whether your life moves forward. And that shift is powerful. Many avoidants become accustomed to knowing that someone will always be there, waiting, hoping, available at a moment's notice. The certainty of that arrangement often allows them to remain comfortable in their distance. But when they see someone genuinely moving forward, not as a tactic, not as a performance, but as a real commitment to growth, they are confronted with a new reality. They realize that time is moving. They realize that opportunities are moving. And they realize that people don't remain suspended forever. Sometimes that realization inspires them to reconnect. Sometimes it doesn't. But here's the crucial point. Your growth can no longer be dependent on their decision. Because the ultimate goal was never to make an avoidant chase you. The ultimate goal was to become the kind of person who continues growing regardless of who stays, who leaves, or who returns. That's true emotional strength. And when you reach that point, something remarkable happens. You stop measuring your life by who chooses you and start measuring it by who you're becoming. And that's the moment you become impossible to ignore, because the people who move forward with purpose are always more powerful than the people who stand still, waiting for permission to live.